All right, let's dive deep today into the world of William Godwin. You know, for a philosopher, he might surprise you.
Yeah, he was a pretty radical guy. Hugely influential too, even if, not a household name exactly these days.
Right, exactly. And to really get to know him, we're going to be looking at the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on him. I'm already getting the sense there's some really interesting stuff in here. What about
Yeah,
you?
absolutely. Tons of intriguing stuff. For starters,
Yeah.
well, who was this Godwin fellow? I mean, born in 1756, he actually starts out as a preacher.
Hold on, a preacher,
Yeah.
but he ends up like the founder of philosophical anarchism. How does that happen?
Well, that's the thing, right? To really grasp his ideas, we kind of have to understand like his personal journey, and it's a wild one. I mean, this is the guy married to, Mary Wollstonecraft, the famous feminist writer,
Oh, wow, yeah.
and his daughter, Mary Shelley, the one who wrote Frankenstein.
Okay, whoa. Talk about a family of intellectual giants.
Oh,
Okay, so we've got this ex-preacher turned radical thinker, wild family history too. But let's get into his philosophy now. Like his big book, Political Justice. This comes out in 1793, right when the French Revolution is going on.
yeah, talk about a time of upheaval.
No kidding. So what did people think when this book dropped?
It was a bombshell, basically, because Godwin's arguing that government, by its very nature, is a corrupting force.
Okay, so not a fan of government. Got it. But what's the basis of this argument? Why does he think that?
Well, he believed, basically, that government creates dependence and ignorance, and that this hinders, the real progress of society.
Yeah.
His vision was a world where people are guided by reason and knowledge to create a just, equitable existence. And eventually, government would be, like, obsolete.
So it's all about the power of reason and knowledge
Yeah.
to lead us to a better future. Like, is that it?
Pretty much, yeah. Godwin had this, like, unshakable faith in human potential. Believed that as we understand more, we just naturally move towards being better. Now, of course, he wasn't oblivious to social forces, but this optimism about human progress, that was core to him.
It's fascinating. I mean, it
Yeah.
really is. But I think what's really striking about Godwin is the way he uses these thought experiments to, like, challenge our ideas about morality. Regular morality.
Oh, yeah, those are fascinating.
Like the famous fire cause dilemma.
Oh, yeah.
Picture this. You're in a burning building. You can only save one person. Choice A is Archbishop Fenelon, this brilliant guy about to write a masterpiece that'll benefit all humanity.
Right.
Option B, your own mother. So who are you saving?
That's a tough one. It's like designed to make you really examine your morals, right? Like, what do you really value?
Totally. And what does Godwin say you should do?
Well, get ready for this. He says you save Fenelon. Yep. Because to him, the moral choice is always the one that maximizes good, not personal feelings. Saving Fenelon, in the long run, benefits more people.
That's intense, to say the least.
Mhm.
I mean, and it makes you think, right, about how much weight we give to personal relationships. What would our listener do? There's a real challenge to think about.
It is. And of course, later on, Godwin kind of acknowledged how important emotions are, but the main point stays the same. We got to aim for impartiality in our moral judgments.
Right, so we've got this radical thinker, champions reason, challenges how we think about right and wrong, and, get this, he was a novelist too.
That's right. And his novels, like Caleb Williams, they kind of explore these same themes, showing how systems of power corrupt people. It's like philosophy, but in action.
So interesting. And one more thing about this philosophical puzzle. Was Godwin a utilitarian? I mean, he did talk about the greatest good for the greatest number, didn't he?
He did. But it's trickier than it looks, because Godwin also really stressed individual judgment. And sometimes that clashes with, like, strict utilitarian ideas.
Yeah.
Creates this tension.
The classic individual versus the group. Does your freedom trump the greater good? We're still debating that today, aren't we? And Godwin really makes us face that question.
Exactly. So here we have William Godwin, anarchist, novelist, moral provocateur, a thinker whose ideas are still relevant all these centuries later. And honestly, we've only just scratched the surface.
Welcome back. We're picking up right where we left off with William Godwin, this tension between individual judgment and utilitarianism. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, how do those two even work together, like practically speaking?
It's a great question. It gets to the heart of how Godwin thought about utilitarianism, his version of it. He
Yeah.
did believe in maximizing happiness, yeah.
Right. Greatest good for the greatest number, all that.
Exactly. But not by, like, squashing individual liberty. He saw them as connected,
Yeah.
not opposites. So it's not just this simple math problem for him, like most happiness equals most good, end of story.
Nope, not at all. To Godwin, it's crucial that people think for themselves, that freedom is how we develop morally, in his view. In fact, he argues that only actions that come from your own understanding are truly moral.
So it's not just about making the right choice, it's how you get there, what led you to it.
Exactly. True morality, for Godwin, is tied to that process
Hmm.
of independent critical thought. And that's where his whole critique of government comes in. He sees government as this thing that, like, imposes limits, rules that stop us from developing that individual judgment.
So it's like he's saying, don't let the government think for you.
In a way, yeah. He believed relying on government too much makes us dependent, makes us less able to think and act for ourselves, and that leads to, like, societal stagnation, things not moving forward.
Okay, so if we shouldn't rely on government, how do we break free? Is it just like getting rid of all authority?
Well, Godwin's anarchism isn't about chaos. It's not everyone doing whatever they want. It's more about replacing external authority, like laws and rulers, with internal authority. Your own moral principles, figured out through reason, through talking with others.
So a society where everyone's self-governing, basically, each person with their own moral compass guiding them.
Precisely. And that's where private judgment becomes super important for Godwin. He believed through open, honest conversations, people refine their understanding of truth, of justice, and that moves society toward being more enlightened, more equal.
Which reminded me of his views on education now. He was a big believer in that, right?
Yeah.
Like, education can change the world.
Absolutely. Godwin saw education as essential to progress. But not just any education, it had to be the kind that makes you think critically, question what you assume is true, encourages you to make up your own mind about things.
So no rote memorization, no just blindly following orders. It's about becoming intellectually independent. Sounds pretty modern, actually.
And it all ties back to his anarchist vision. See, the more knowledgeable people are, the better they are at thinking for themselves, the less they need external control. That's how he saw it.
This is a fascinating idea, I'll give him that. But also kind of idealistic, right?
Well, absolutely. Plenty of people criticize Godwin. But what's so interesting is, even if you disagree with him, his ideas make you think about really fundamental stuff. What's the role of government? What is morality? Can humanity really progress?
Yeah, he's definitely someone who pushes you to question the way things are. That's got to be a mark of a good philosopher, right?
Couldn't agree more. Now, you mentioned before that Godwin was a novelist, too. Let's dig into that a bit, because his fiction often became like a testing ground for his philosophy, exploring the dark side of power through stories.
Yeah, like Caleb Williams, his most famous novel. It shows how even the search for justice can get twisted, become destructive, especially when the system's rigged against you.
Exactly. Godwin uses fiction to show what his philosophical ideas look like in the real world. And he doesn't shy away from showing that even good people can become part of oppressive systems. It's complex.
It's like he's saying power doesn't just corrupt the people the top, it corrupts anyone caught in its web.
Precisely. He offers this nuanced take on human behavior, right? We're all shaped by the social and political stuff around us. It's not always simple.
And that message, it still resonates, right, with so many social movements happening today.
Totally. It shows how relevant Godwin still is. I mean, he was writing in the 18th century, but his ideas about unchecked authority, about individual freedom, the possibility of progress, people are still talking about that, acting on that.
Shows you the power of ideas, right? They could last for centuries. Okay, so we've got Godwin's anarchism, his unique take on utilitarianism, his focus on education, individual judgment, even his novels. But there's one more piece. His views on history and progress.
Right, because Godwin believed that history, even with all its ups and downs, it shows this trend, right, towards greater enlightenment, human liberation, even.
So we were talking about Godwin's, well, his pretty optimistic view of history. Like he really believed in progress toward this greater enlightenment, human liberation, all that.
He did, yeah. Which, you think about it, it's interesting considering how much he disliked government. Like, if government's always corrupting us, shouldn't societies get better the less government they have? Shouldn't history show that?
Right. That's a good point.
Yeah.
So how do we square that optimism with, the reality of history, which, let's face it, can be pretty brutal, pretty discouraging at times? Did Godwin just, ignore the bad stuff?
No, not at all. I mean, he was a historian himself, so he knew how complex history is, how contradictory. But he saw those setbacks, not as proof that progress is wrong, but more like bumps in the road, on this long, messy journey to a better future.
So 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah.
Kind of Progress.
Exactly. He knew it's rarely straightforward, or predictable. Things advance, then they regress, it's back and forth. But through it all, he held on to this idea that the overall direction is upwards, driven by human reason, getting stronger over time.
But history's full of examples of societies collapsing, empires falling apart, people making the same dumb mistakes again and again. Where's the evidence for this upward trend he's so sure of?
You're right to ask that, and Godwin wouldn't deny those things happen. But he'd point to other trends, things that DO back him up, like the spread of knowledge, literacy. He thought the printing press, that was huge for liberating people.
Makes sense. More people can read, get information, the more they can, challenge the powers that be, think for themselves.
Exactly. And Godwin saw the rise of democracy, those ideals, those institutions, as signs of progress, too. Flawed as they might be, they're still moving toward a society where everyone's more equal.
So he was looking for those glimmers of hope, right? Those signs that humanity is getting somewhere, even if it's slow and messy.
Yep, and he found them in the way hierarchies were slowly breaking down. More recognition of individual rights, less tolerance for violence, oppression. To him, those trends, however fragile, they pointed to a future where reason and justice win out.
It's a compelling vision, I'll give him that. But sometimes it's tough to buy into it. When the world feels so, I don't know, bleak, chaotic, like we're just lurching from one crisis to the next.
I get that. And Godwin's philosophy isn't about, blindly believing things will get better automatically. He knew there'd be challenges, struggles along the way, but he had this deep faith in our ability to, learn from our mistakes, to adapt, to keep pushing for something better.
So it's not just hoping passively, it's a call to action.
Exactly. Godwin's saying, don't get complacent. Progress doesn't just happen. We got to work for it. Think critically, challenge injustice, fight for a more just and equal world. That's on us.
So last question. What would a Godwinian society look like today? What can we actually take from his philosophy and apply now in the 21st century?
That's the question, isn't it? I think Godwin would say, be suspicious of concentrated power, whether it's governments, corporations, whatever. He'd want education that teaches people how to think for themselves, and spaces where we can have open, honest discussions. And he'd remind us, progress, however slow it seems, it comes down to what we choose to do, how we act.
So even if we don't become full-blown anarchists, his ideas give us a way to think about the problems we face and to imagine, maybe, a better way forward.
Exactly. William Godwin may not have had all the answers, but he asked the right questions, that's for sure. And those questions matter now more than ever.
Well, there you have it. William Godwin, anarchist, novelist, someone who really challenged how people thought about morality, and a thinker whose ideas are still relevant all these centuries later.
We hope this deep dive sparked your curiosity, maybe even inspired you to explore Godwin's work a bit more on your own.
And until next time, keep those minds sharp and never stop questioning.